Hello, everyone. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Sobriety with Drake, where we discuss all things addiction related reality shows like intervention, celebrity rehab, and then also other addiction recovery, sobriety related topics. And for today's video, it will be my first video in my series of intervention episode reviews. And we're going to go back all the way to season 1, episode 1 to start this series, talking about an addict named Alyson. And I will go through what happens in the episode and give my opinions and thoughts on things that happen in the episode. And then at the end, give my overall opinion on as the episode as a whole, how it was edited, how it was portrayed, the addict themselves, things like that. So yeah, I have seen a lot of episodes of Intervention as an Intervention fan, but there are so many that I still have not seen to this day, or a lot that I have seen, but it was over like 10 years ago since I've seen them. So it'll be interesting to see these episodes like it's watching them for the first time ever again, and then also seeing how it used to be back in the day in the first few episodes of the show and see how it has evolved over time. So yeah, we'll get started, but first I also want to mention I do have a super thanks that I'm going to be mentioning at the end of the video. And if you'd like to be featured in a video, please leave a super thanks below and you will be featured in my next video. Thanks so much. Now we'll get started. So season 1, episode 1 of Intervention premiered on March 6th, 2005. And again, it featured an addict named Alyson, who was 27 years old and was a former White House intern. But eventually her life began to fall apart due to her use of drugs such as heroin, crack, and morphine. And then she now lives with her parents and is struggling with addiction. The first scene we see of Alyson is a home video where Alyson is going through severe opioid withdrawals, and she is talking about how miserable life is and how terrible she feels at the time. And I think this is really great of the show to display the biological factors of addiction. It is such a big part of addiction, you know, the withdrawals, the tolerance, the things that make you go back to the drug because they make you feel better when you're feeling like crap because of the drug. Like for me, when I would go through withdrawals, the only thing I could think of getting me out of it at the time was having more of the drug. So it's like a vicious cycle that this biological factor of addiction keeps you in. So I thought that was great that the show, showed this in their first episode, displaying what addiction really looks like. Next, we first get to meet Alyson's mother, Patricia, and her sister, Kara. And her mother talks about how she has Alyson living at home. And the reason why is because she doesn't want to kick her out because she feels like if she kicks her out, that she will die living on the streets because of how reckless and how dangerous she is when she's on drugs. And that keeping her at home will keep her safe, even though in the end it is enabling her to keep using in a comfortable way. Next, the show gets into describing some of the consequences Alyson has faced because of her addiction. They state that she had a full ride scholarship to college and that she had to drop out just one semester short of graduating because of her addiction. After that, we see a clip of Alyson where she's very visibly upset, very angry, mostly directed at her parents, but she seems to be very angry with just her situation in life right now. And I believe this is something that, comes about with the use of uppers stimulants like crack and meth and things like that, because they make your mood so elevated when you're on them, that you're feeling this like euphoria, but when you come down there's a lot of irritability, a lot of just anger and resentment that comes up because you're so upset with yourself. And that's like with any drug, but especially with crack and things like that, because of the way they change your mood and the chemicals in your brain, how it goes up and down. It almost creates like a bipolar disorder. And a lot of these times when we diagnose people with bipolar disorder or depression or anxiety, most of the time when it's with someone who's an addict, the mental illness comes after the addiction. And once you treat the addiction, the mental illness goes away. So I thought that was really cool that the show touched on the psychological aspect of addiction. So we've got the biological, the psychological. I think the show is doing a really good job at showing all different sides of addiction. Next, we meet Alyson's dad, Hal, who talks about what Alyson was like when she came home from school and moved home, and how she had lost the twinkle in her eyes, is what he said. And then he says something which at first I kind of took like, wow, that's kind of harsh. But he said that at least she had a home to come to, or else she'd be a whore in the street, which, is something pretty like harsh and demeaning to say about your daughter. But as you see as this episode goes on, Hal becomes a very sympathetic figure in the episode. He's going through so much, and the things Alyson puts him through, it isn't that harsh coming from him saying this, from all the things she's done and put him through. Next, the show does something that's pretty regular for every intervention episode. They go back in time to Alyson's childhood, showing old family photos and pictures of Alyson, and talk about her life as a child, and talk about how she was a very smart and academic and successful child who won tons of awards and achievements. And it just shows like how she had so much potential, and there's still so much potential there. It kind of humanizes this addict for us, and that's something the show has continued to do in many episodes since. So it's interesting to see that they started this even in episode 1. Next, the show shows a clip of Alyson going through her bag and pulling out all of her medications that she takes. And it's just a pretty insane scene to see how many medications she's on and how many things she's prescribed. This was filmed back in 2005, so I'm not sure how much has changed in this aspect of pharmaceutical drugs, but she's being prescribed like things like Klonopin, Xanax, Adderall, all these things that are mind altering, and she abuses them as well. After this, despite showing all the medications that Alyson is prescribed, the show talks about how her father is very sick and is dealing with battling like aneurysms, and he takes morphine for his aneurysms and the pain he's in, and how Alyson steals her father's medication. And then Alyson's mom explains how Alyson doesn't even help out with taking care of her dad at home, how she kind of makes things worse for him, and that he's getting even more sick because of the things she's doing and that it's causing him stress. The next scene is a very shocking scene from this episode. It's probably the scene that stood out to me the most from this whole episode. We see Alyson's father, Hal, laying in bed downstairs. He's got all these tubes in him and he's just resting. And we see Alyson notice this, so she goes downstairs while her father's sleeping into his room, notices that his safe with all of his medications is open. So she opens the safe and starts stealing all of his morphine pills and then puts them in like her pocket or something. And then she walks over to her dad, who's still asleep, wakes him up and just tells him, "Oh, mom called, I love you so much." And he's like, "Oh, I love you too, honey," totally unaware that she had just stolen medication from him. And then she goes back upstairs and takes the pills. And it's just a very shocking scene because it's like her father is just completely unaware of what's happening, and he just wants, he loves her, and he just thought she was coming down to say that she loves him and like tell him that her mom called, and no, she was stealing his medications. And it was just very heartbreaking to see, and it just shows how like the lengths that addicts will go to get high, and the things that we will do like with no remorse at the time or no regret at the time. And it's just crazy what this addiction does to people. So I thought that was a very shocking moment from this episode that I'll always remember. Next, the show touches on Alyson's strained relationship with her sister Kara, and it shows Kara coming to make a visit to the home where she's like on the phone with someone, and Alyson notices, and she's starting to play the piano really loudly just to get Kara off the phone. So then Kara gets off the phone, and Alyson just proceeds to start a huge argument with her about like things from 10 years ago, from the past, and they start bickering back and forth about all these past issues, placing blame on the other and just like nitpicking at each other's like defects and things like that. And it just goes on to like show like how self-centered addicts are, like that the whole world revolves around them. Like her sister's just coming to visit, is on the phone, but nope, I have to make it about me and start a fight with you because I have to tear you down to make you feel how shitty I feel. And that's what it kind of felt like in this moment. But also Kara, Alyson's sister, was also not very graceful with the way she handled Alyson at this time. Like, she knows she's sick, she's struggling. She could have gave her a little bit of grace, but at the same time, it's very frustrating to deal with an addict who's in active addiction and to talk reasonably with them. So I totally get where her sister was coming from. It was just really sad to see the two's relationship be very strained. So yeah, the past few things I've talked about have kind of delved into the social aspect of addiction. And so we've talked about like the biological, like the withdrawal, things like that, and then the psychological, like her mood being unhinged and things like that, and then how her social life is deteriorating because of her addiction. And then this also includes the next scene where Alyson talks about how she first moved into her parents' house, leaving college. She moved in with a boyfriend named Richie at the time, who was a very problematic person in her life. He would steal from her family when he moved in, and then he was also injecting her with drugs. So the family, like, kicked him out, told him you cannot stay here. And I guess Alyson in this scene has not been able to get a hold of Richie for about like 6 months. And so she's like calling all of his family members and things like that. And then she eventually gets to talking to one of his family members on the phone, and the family member states that Richie had been incarcerated and that he's sentenced to a 6-month sentence in Rikers Island for, I'm not sure what it was for, but she completely freaked out, was like, "Oh my God, I thought he was just not talking to me because he hated me," and like was just super obsessive about this guy who completely like helped ruin her life, and yet she's still like obsessed and in love with him. And she goes down to talk to her father about it, and her father's like, "You need to stop reaching out to that guy," like trying to help her, but she's not listening. She's just very like freaked out that he's in prison, like, "Oh my God, what if he never gets out? What if he never talks to me again?" And it was just like a really Interesting thing to see how also in addiction is codependent relationships. That's a big theme with two addicts dating. They can lead to being addicted to each other and, feeding off of each other's addiction and enabling each other. And, having two people in an addiction together helps, keep the addiction going longer because you're not alone. So like that was just interesting to see how she also had a codependent relationship in her addiction, and that's something that I think the show touched on very well. That is very common among people that are addicts. So next we see something in the show that I've never actually seen in any other episode before. We see Alyson's parents both calling and reaching out to a rehabilitation center. And I've never seen where the parents actually call and schedule the rehabilitation themselves. I thought it was always like the producers of the show who do that. But I guess back then in this episode, they had the parents do that, which I thought was interesting. And then after that, we get our first introduction into Jeff, the interventionist, who is a very reoccurring interventionist on the show. And I did do a poll on my channel about a month ago with the four most common interventionists that are on the show, Candy, Donna, Ken, and Jeff, and asked everyone who their favorite was. And it was a very close, almost nearly tie between Jeff and Candy for the most votes, but I think Jeff came on top as the favorite interventionist of everyone. So it's cool to see like he was the first ever one on the show, and this is our first introduction to him and how he works his interventions. So next we get the first ever pre-intervention of the show where Jeff sits down with Alyson's family and friends and kind of goes over things about the intervention that are going to happen. And one thing he says in this is that there are no good guys and there are no bad guys in this situation. Like Alyson being the addict is not a bad guy and we're not, the good guys saving the day. And then he also uses this metaphor where he says that Alyson's family and friends have been her treatment center this whole time and that they are unqualified to be a treatment center and that now they are fired from being her treatment center and she has to find an actual treatment center. And he also talked about how the family's probably relieved to not have to be her treatment center anymore and that this is a good thing for everyone. So I like how he used that metaphor because that is kind of how it is. Like the family and friends always attempt to be like save the day and be the ones helping the person with their addiction, but they really can't do what everything that they want to do if they're not like qualified for the job and have training and resources. So I like this metaphor from Jeff. And then Jeff also talks about like the bottom lines for the family, the things that they're going to have to say to Alyson if she says no to treatment, and them setting these guidelines that they have to stick to for it to be successful and for her to actually go. Next is another very wild, pretty shocking scene from this episode. Probably the other scene I will most likely remember from this episode when thinking about it. And it's a scene that they cut to after the pre-intervention of Alyson hanging out with some guy whose face is blurred out, and they are smoking crack together. And Alyson gets like really high with this guy and starts telling him when she's really high, oh, I love you so much. I love smoking crack with you. I love being around you. I want to be around you with you all the time. And it was just like, you could tell even with the face blur, this guy was like not cute, just very disgusting, like gross guy. And he was like, cuddling all on her. And it was just like, this took me back to my addiction. Back when I was a meth addict and I would hang out with like these shady guys and they would get me really high and I would just like look into their eyes and tell them how much I loved them and how amazing they were. But it really wasn't them that I loved. It was the drugs they were giving me that were making me think I really liked this person. So it's crazy what these drugs, especially stimulants, make you feel towards other people that are really bad for you. And it was just like a really gross, like creepy scene. And I just like, it struck me like very much personally because I was Alyson before where I was in that situation and it just took me back to those moments. So that was a scene I'll definitely not forget. So now we cut to the first time we've ever had an intervention on the show Intervention, the first intervention ever, very iconic, and I have to say it is a very heartwarming, wonderful intervention, and I love that this happened to be the first ever intervention of the show. I think it's like a perfect one to start the series. Alyson walks in and she sees all of her family and friends. They actually do the intervention at her house. So I know later on in the show they do it off site on different places, but this was at her house and like her family and friends were there. She walks down and is like, oh my God, this is like a surprise birthday party. She's super excited to see all of her family. And then Jeff introduces himself, the interventionist, to her and says, we are all here fighting for you to live, and we want you to join the fight, which I think was a great way to start off the intervention. Then it cuts to her dad reading his letter for her, and he's the only one to read a letter in this whole intervention. There's only one letter because he pretty much lays it down, like talks about her childhood and uses something that she loved in her childhood, which was, seeing the rainbows after the hailstorm. And then he kind of uses that as a metaphor for her addiction being the hailstorm, and that there's now rainbows to come after this addiction. And, right after that, he says, would you go to treatment? Were you ready to accept this help? And immediately Alyson says, yes, I'm ready, like right away. So amazing. She's on board. No issue at all. Right away says yes. Then Alyson's dad does something which Jeff actually talked about this with the family before the intervention. Do not mention how long she's leaving, and do not bring it up. Well, then Alyson's dad proceeds to bring up, oh, do you know how long you're going to be there for, Alyson? Do you know how long you're going to be there for? We're going to be there for 90 days. Do you want to know how long you're going to be there? Like, he keeps talking about it, like literally sabotaging the intervention. So Jeff had to like pull him aside and be like, don't say that, don't say that. Alyson's friend then pulls her upstairs to go pack. And then Alyson's, getting things together. Her friend's like monitoring her. And then she's like, I need my pills. I need my pills. So then she goes down to her dad, ask him for some morphine pills to take. He gives her like 8 morphine pills, and she just literally downs them all right away. And her friend notices this and goes to tell Jeff, the interventionist, that Alyson just took a bunch of pills. And Jeff's like, it's no big deal. It will probably help her, hold her over until she gets to rehab. I'll be monitoring her. I'll be with her. Jeff will be with her the whole time getting to rehab, and that he'll make sure she doesn't take anything else. And so Jeff, I like how he handled this. He didn't freak out that Alyson just took a bunch of pills. He didn't get mad at the dad for giving her a bunch of pills. He said, let it be. We'll work through it. It's probably, and looked at the positive side of it. Like, it'll probably hold her over until we get to the rehab center. So then they show Alyson, getting to the rehab center, checking in, meeting the director of operations at the center, and then fast forward to a year later, they check in on Alyson. She looks completely different, looks amazing, and she's really anxious and nervous because her family's coming to visit, and she's going to see them for the first time in like a year. And so her family arrives. It's like a beautiful reunion. Her dad's crying, she's crying. I mean, you can tell they have a very close bond, her and her dad, which is amazing to see. And then they go to this it looks like an AA meeting, kind of like an open talk kind of meeting, where Alyson stands up to celebrate her 1 year sober, and she gives this amazing speech about how she is just so proud of like the things she's accomplished and how far she's come, and that she's ready to give back to her family all that they've given to her. And I thought it was really beautiful that like her dad, after this, in a confessional, which is like the interview style scenes of the show where they interview someone with a camera, he holds up her coin, her year coin, and says, this means so much, like I'm so proud of this, what this little coin represents. And just like the focus of this coin, this chip that you get on the show, was really cool because I'll show you my year coin. So I have 16 months sober, and I've gotten these coins every month in my first year. Then I got my year coin, and I never really thought much about my coin. I just thought, oh, hey, it's a little something cool you get when you get a year. But I never really realized, like, this coin, my coin, here it is. It represents that first year, all that hard work you put in a physical, way. And this episode really made me take a different look at these coins and realize the significance of them. And I really appreciated that from this episode. Like mine, my sponsor gave to me, and it's supposed to be like alien kind of UFO kind of vibes, because I had this delusion in my meth psychosis about being on an alien reality show called Alien Idol, and it became a running joke between me and my sponsor. So he got this coin in reference to that, as kind of like something funny and something that was special between us that I shared with him. So yeah, I really liked how this episode ended on that focusing on those little chips, those milestones you get in recovery, and the joy it brings to your family. And it was just a beautiful episode overall. I would have to say this is a great premiere of intervention. It really gets you hooked into the show. It has everything an intervention episode has, like, it needs. Like, it has a great storyline. It has drama. It has you feel sympathy for the addict, you feel disdain for the addict. Like, you at one point really dislike the addict, but then you grow to love them and their family and get really invested. It's an episode that gets you very invested in the family of these people you don't even know. And that's what intervention is all about: relating to other addicts and learning and educating yourself about addiction and how it works between a family, because it's a family disease. And I think this episode really showed that in a great way. So overall, I would recommend this episode. If I would have to give it a score from 1 through 10, 10 being the best, 1 being the worst, I would give it an 8.5. That's my rating for this episode, 8.5. So I'm going to continue doing this series, my intervention episode reviews. And I'll be doing season 1, episode 2 for my next video, and I'll go through it just like I did with this video. And now, real quick, I have a super thanks I'd like to mention from Lisa Olson. Thank you so much, Lisa Olson. I really appreciate the generosity and the support for this channel. It really helps a lot, and it helps me to continue making these videos, and I just really appreciate your support. So thank you so much. And that's it for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe if you like this video, and check out my other videos on more intervention content, celebrity rehab content, or just content about my life in addiction and now recovery. So, yeah, thanks so much. Love you guys. Bye.